This is my 30th video on my work with OO gauge. See part 1 of this series for my reasons for getting into OO gauge when I already had a lot invested in working in N gauge and I didn't really have space for a large, fully operational OO gauge layout. Also see my lengthy series on my N gauge railway modelling for smaller and more complex scenery and smaller scale trains running. This part is the 4th part dealing with my 3rd layout to be made using mainly Hornby set track. See the prior video, part 27, for my reasons for wanting to try a Hornby set track layout when I already had a layout using Bachmann Easy Track. This part deals with further work on my Hornby layout, chiefly with unboxing and testing a Hornby electrically operated turntable. This video will be mainly about the Hornby turntable, but I'm still proceeding with various other prep work on this layout. My back scene hasn't come yet. When the back scene does arrive, I want to take down the board completely, mount the back scene to the wall behind, then remount the board with some proper wooden supports. It's just sitting on boxes on top of the futon at the moment. I want to get my track plan and the general proposed layout of things on the board finalized as much as possible before taking down the board, so I can then do some painting, texturing and grassing on the board before starting to lay down the track on a more permanent basis. I wanted to try to sort out how I might lay some roads on the layout, and to do that I need a more precise idea of how the station is going to fit, as fairly obviously I want the station building to be served by a road. In order to see where the road and the station grounds need to go, somebody roaring by outside on a motorbike. In order to see where the roads and the station grounds need to go, I need to have a plan of the platforms and the station building. I'm going to be building the platforms, as with many of my previous stations, from one of Metcalfe's card platform kits, this time the OO gauge kit for brick-edged platforms, PO216, PO216. In order to plan these platforms, I need to make sure that my longest coaches will be able to clear the platform edges as they come into the station. The instructions to the Metcalfe kit suggest doing it this way. Take your longest coach, in my case a 68-foot 12-wheeled LMS Dyna, and draw along where the middle of the coach goes for inside curves and where the end of the coach goes for outside curves. Most of my platforms are going to be along the long straight at the back of the layout, but a slight curve may be required at the very ends by the ramps. I intend to use a mixture of cork and Rapido noise killer track bed for my track underlay. I bought a 2-foot by 3-foot roll of cork 4mm thick from a local hardware store, and after weighting this down for a while to get it to lay flat, I cut a section and put it under the tracks at the front of the layout, where most of the points are. I've marked on the cork the upper extent of the tracks. The portion below that line I intend to cut out and glue down to go permanently under those tracks. It'll then get painted before the tracks are laid on top of it. I'm now thinking that I'll also use cork to form my roads, so I'll need to get another 2x3 piece, and then I will be able to mark out roads coming from the level crossing and going round the centre of the board serving the station. Here I've made paper templates for both platforms and for the station building. For the station building I've ordered the Super Quick Country Station Kit, as this is one that I've not used before and it looks quite suitable. It is designed to fit over the back of a platform, with part of the structure on the platform and part at ground level behind the platform. Hopefully I'll be able to get it to fit together with the Metcalfe platform. The template for the station building was taken from Superquick's own website and then correctly adjusted for size before printing from my PC. Now on to the turntable. Here it is in its box. I bought this as a new R070, which is Hornby's current version. However, it turned out that there was some doubt about its provenance. It seemed to actually be a used item with something of a jumble of parts in the box, and instructions that belonged to a different earlier version of the Hornby turntable, R410. Here you can see a bit of what I mean about a jumble of parts. There were various bits of cut-off wire, one set of railings fitted on the turntable and another set wrapped in paper, and the bottom part of the water crane was missing. Nigel of British Model Trains, where I bought this, did offer me a partial refund in view of its odd condition. He said that he was supplied with it as a new item from the Canadian importer of Hornby. Here are the bits spread out a bit more. Although the instructions say hand-operated turntable, the turntable was motorized and the motor did work without problems when 12 volts were applied to it. The first thing I did was to just apply power to the wires to ensure that the table motor worked and the table rotated. The wires had been cut off and were short, with no plugs on the ends of them. This was where I intended to have the turntable, with its access served by the turnout track from the inner loop. The turntable must be connected to the main layout via the track 2 clockwise from the motor housing. This particular access point must be used for the main feed unless you're somehow intending to rebuild the turntable with your own wiring, as the access point at this point has special contacts for taking the loco power from the main layout. In addition to the various bits of wire and the extra railings, my turntable also came with various extra gears. It appeared that these were spare, as the turntable worked as it was, rotating and stopping as intended. I connected up some parking tracks to the turntable. It seems that basically there are two types of problems you can have with this turntable, and I had been forewarned that problems were fairly common. The two basic types of problems are that either the turntable won't turn properly, potentially getting stuck and stripping the plastic gears, or that the turntable won't connect properly with the parking tracks to feed them power. So far I have not had the first type of problem. My turntable has turned without problems, albeit extremely noisily. Where I have had problems is with the second type, getting the parking tracks to actually work. I needed to make sure that the installation of the turntable would work okay with my intended station and roads. This somewhat limited how I could place parking tracks around the table. Also, tracks must be placed so that no track is opposite to another if they're to be used for parking and you're operating the turntable as wired by Hornby, since the arm of the turntable, if working properly, will supply to any parking tracks at either end. So if you had opposite tracks, they'd both get powered at the same time and so couldn't really be used for parking. Because I wanted to leave room for roads, I didn't want tracks coming out from the upper left of my turntable. The tracks shown here were all I could really fit in. I didn't have Hornby set track pieces left over for the two tracks at top, seen here as stubs, so I was intending to use some flex track for those. I marked the rails of the flex track where I would need to cut it in order to produce the appropriate length for the parking tracks. Then I cut the rails using a cutting disc on a rotary tool. Then the sleeper web was cut with a knife. Then I eased the sleepers away at the end and removed a little plastic under the rails to make room for fish plates fitted to the ends of the rails. I fitted buffers made from Pico kits to the ends of the tracks. Here are those parking tracks now in place on the turntable. Unfortunately, I had a devil of a job getting those parking tracks to actually work. This didn't seem to be anything to do with the flex track. Even if I fitted parking tracks made with set track in those locations, they wouldn't work. It seemed that the Hornby turntable just didn't want to make proper electrical connection with parking tracks in some positions. I spent hours and hours working on this problem. I tried different access track pieces in different positions to see if that helped. It seemed that the problem was with certain positions not working rather than certain tracks. I tried using pliers to bend the ends of the access rails to make them better contact the brass or copper contacts on the moving table. I tried putting Vaseline on the contacts to help with making contact. What you see here seems to be the root of these problems. Those little round brass or copper contacts on the end of the moving arm of the turntable are supposed to press up and make contact with the bottoms of the rails of the clip-in access pieces, and they just don't seem to reliably do so in some positions. I don't know why. Some positions seem to work fine. Others can barely be made to work at all, whatever I do. I guess somehow the turntable doesn't reliably keep the contacts at the same level in all positions. As I say, I struggled literally for hours trying to fix this issue. I just about got the difficult positions to work sometimes, but that was the best I could do. You can see here that I've bent down the ends of the access rails to help them contact the copper pieces better, but obviously considerable care needs to be taken doing that, as if the rails are bent down too much they'll jam the rotation of the turntable and likely damage either the gears or the motor. I should perhaps clarify that I'm using a totally separate 12-volt DC power supply to power the rotation of the turntable, as the instructions said to use a switched 12 volts for this purpose, and my controller doesn't have a fixed DC output, just controlled DC and fixed AC for accessories. So the power to rotate the turntable is coming totally separately from the power for the rest of the layout. This is my Kato powered turntable on my N-gauge layout. It was quite a bit more expensive than the Hornby turntable, but it's also way better. It has worked fine with no problems at all since I got it, never failing to rotate and stop properly, never failing to supply power to the parking tracks. And it also has tracks at 10-degree intervals, meaning you can have an access track and 17 parking tracks without any tracks being opposite to each other, whereas the Hornby turntable has tracks at 22.5-degree intervals, so you could only have 7 parking tracks plus an access track at most. The Kato turntable was a little trickier to install as it needed to be recessed into the board. See my N-gauge series for the installation and subsequent expansion of the Kato turntable. So this is where I've got to currently. The turntable is sort of working, but not very reliably on some of the parking tracks. I did drill a hole through the board to pass the turntable wires, but I didn't solder anything for now, as I'll need to take everything apart one more time. Here you can see my second piece of cork laid out in the centre of the board. Now I need to mark on there how my roads will go, and then I can cut the cork to shape and glue it down. Now to finish, just a little video of the Hornby turntable in operation. Okay, I just want to shoot a little bit of video showing this Hornby turntable working or not working, as the case may be. If it all works, I shall be very happy. I shall also be very surprised, because I've spent hours and hours messing around with it and I've never really been able to get it to all work, but we'll see. Okay, so we'll put an engine on it. That part works. Okay, so now we'll start it turning. Just putting 12 volts in it, and we'll try and take the engine off onto that first track. Good, whoopee, that one works. So now we'll put the engine back on it, and we'll move it over again. Very noisy, as you can hear. Which way do I need to go? Yes, that way. It's hard, very hard, I find, to figure out which way I need to go. Although that works. I've spent hours and hours working to try and get these tracks working, so, but I still don't think they're all going to. I've got 3 to work so far, that's good. I think the next one coming up, it tends to be the one that's been the biggest problem. When I say it's the problem, it's the position on the... Oh, it worked. Ooh. So it looks as if I'm not demonstrating how it doesn't work, I'm demonstrating how I've finally got it to work. That one always worked. Let's just keep going and try the other end of the turntable. Wrong way. I can never figure out which way it's going to go. Ooh, that wasn't lined up very well, was it? But it worked anyway. You kind of need to wait until it starts grinding again. Oops, now that one's not working. Now that one's not working. Oh, so I give in at that point. So that's about it. They sometimes work, they sometimes don't. And that's the problem, is that, you know, it's just very difficult to get the electrical connection properly made between the end of the turntable and those on the tracks, those parking tracks. And that was the performance that you just saw there, is after me spending hours and hours and hours messing around with it, trying to get it to work better. Gently bending the ends of the onlet tracks and putting Vaseline on the contacts and whatever. So there you go. I can't honestly recommend this thing. I have a Kato turntable that costs more, but it works fine all the time. This thing, you just spend hours and hours and hours messing around with it, and you can never really get it to work properly.